I love dogs, and I love memoirs. But did I love Dogs, Boys, and Other Things I've Cried About, the new memoir by Isabel Klee? Hi, I'm Amanda, and this is Spineless Books, your one-stop spoiler-free shop for all things audiobook. I have followed Isabel Klee, otherwise known as Simon Sits, on social media for many years. I'm a huge fan of dogs, and she is the queen of fostering dogs and rehabilitating them. And I was aware through her social media that she was writing a memoir. And I was super excited to learn more about her through this memoir because I find her completely intriguing. I love following her stories of fostering, her own personal life stories that she shares, and the sagas of her dog Simon, who is sort of the backbone of her entire channel. So when I heard about the memoir, it got me really jazzed. And then I heard that the title was Dogs, Boys, and Other Things I've Cried About, and I thought, oh, well, I hope this is everything I hope for. The book essentially has two components. You've got the fostering story, and you've got the chronological story of Isabel Klee coming to New York City in her early 20s and learning how to have a life there and love the city. That includes stories of jobs, relationships, apartments, roommates, you name it. Interspersed in her journey is the story of all of her foster dogs, which to me was really intriguing, and each one sort of represented a lesson. I came into the story feeling like I was fairly familiar with her writing. She often writes crafted pieces on her social media, so it's not just her speaking live all the time. And I know sort of the style with which she presents those things, and her book was no different. She is a good writer, and she's able to tell a story with ease and momentum. And I particularly love those passages where she pulled back and really talked about the meaning of dogs in our lives, because that was the thing that resonated the hardest with me. I found myself easily flowing through her stories of relationships and roommates, and fairly honestly, as far as I can tell, some of the mistakes that she's made. The more poetic passages about dogs are the thing that really grabbed my attention, though, and they made me reflect on my own dog, Homer, who was with me from the time that I moved out of my childhood home until well through my adulthood. Homer was there for every memory, every heartbreak, every really rough time, and losing Homer was one of the hardest things I have ever had to go through. Truly. He's just interwoven in all of my memories from that very critical time of my becoming an adult, and I related very much to the way that Isabel talks about Simon in the book in that role for her. I do have to admit, I had some confusion about the book as a fan of her channel. Because as I was listening to the chronological story of Isabel Klee learning New York City, so to speak, the dogs that I recognized from more recent social media appeared. And it took me a little while to understand that the dogs were not connected chronologically, because I thought I was hearing the story of her entire life in order. In fact, the story about New York and dating and everything else is in order, but the dogs are interspersed in a way where each one represents a lesson learned in the story about her life. Clever for sure, but definitely as someone who had more familiarity, I was confused. I remember how some of the foster dogs reacted to her current fiancé, who I have known as long as I've known her channel, and I just couldn't understand why he wasn't in the picture when she was talking about these fosters. But I later understood that essentially what she's doing is using each dog as an archetype, as a lesson, and I think that worked really well once I got over my confusion. I think the only drawback of this story is that it's going to appeal to a very specific demographic. Young women in particular, especially young women who are trying to find their way in young adulthood, I think this book nails it for them. I think anyone trying to find their way in a big city is going to get a lot out of this, but again, especially women. I also think anyone navigating the trials and tribulations of failed relationships before finding their person is going to get something out of this one too. But again, geared toward women. I'm not saying men can't read and enjoy it, because of course they can, but I just think that's the target audience here. On a personal note, I wasn't really super interested in her early relationships and the musings and mistakes that she talked about. I know her as someone who's into fostering, and I think that's what makes her memoir unique. I will confess I was very interested when she got to her current relationship with her fiancé, Jacob, because Jacob is a character who I know from social media. Granted, he's a real person, but I was interested in learning about their relationship and how things went for them. I didn't really care as much about the mistakes she made when she was younger, and that's just me. She has every right to write about it, but I'm sharing how I responded to the book. I guess what I'm saying is that I expected something different. Isabel Klee is a very strong writer. I will give her that any day. But I thought this book was going to have more of a focus on dogs, and I feel like it was a book about coming of age in New York City and her relationships with dogs interspersed. I kind of expected it to be dogs with the rest of it interspersed. So that's just my own expectation and the reason for my disappointment, but it's nothing wrong with the book. She's got every right to write her memoir exactly the way she wants. I do think there are plenty of young women who will see themselves in this book and will enjoy reading everything she writes. I'm not one of them. I think I'm past that stage in life, and I've got my own messes to reflect on. I don't really need to read about somebody else's. They didn't do anything to help me understand my own. They just accounted for hers. I think if the book had focused more on dogs like I was hoping, then I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. As a narrator, Isabel Klee does a great job. I'm used to hearing her narrate many of her pieces on social media, so it was a very familiar tone and it felt like her. It felt authentic to her, and I always believe that a memoir should be read by the person whose story we are hearing. I don't think it makes any sense to have a narrator read your own story when you wrote it and it's you. So I love that she narrated her own book, and she does a great job. I feel like all I have seen about this book are rave reviews, but in fairness, I've only seen reviews posted on Isabel Klee's channel. I do think this book has a lot of merit. I give her a lot of credit. She did a lot of being vulnerable in the story. But again, for me, I'm really into her for her dogs, not so much for her city life and relationships. And I think that's what her channel reflects, so I expected the book to reflect the same. But then again, why would you make something that reflects exactly what you're already showing? So I get the other side of things too. It was not a 5-star read for me like I keep seeing everywhere, but it was a 4-star read. I do think it's a good book. I think it's a good memoir. And again, I think there is a target audience for this that is enormous, and she's tapped into a lot of them on her social media. So it's no surprise it's a bestseller. But for me, it was just a good memoir. But remember, you might love what I hate and hate what I love. So make your own opinion. But thanks for listening to mine. See you next time, and go give your heart dog a kiss for me.